If you're applying to law school in the next few years, you're walking into one of the most competitive, most unstable, and most rapidly changing periods in legal education history. And most applicants have no idea. They are obsessing over US News rankings, they're chasing top LSAT scores like it's the only thing that matters, and they're applying with strategies that worked in 2012, not 2025. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, law schools are rewriting the rules. The classroom model is being torn down and rebuilt from scratch. AI is eliminating entire categories of entry-level legal work. The bar exam is being redesigned from scratch, and legal employers are demanding new skills that most grads still aren't being taught. Now, you don't need to be afraid of this, but you do need to understand it and adjust fast, because what worked for the last generation of law students won't work for you. This video is your inside look at what's really happening. I'll break down exactly what's changing, why it matters, and how to use it to your advantage. So if you're serious about law school, especially if you're aiming for the T14, public interest careers, or long-term impact, you cannot ignore this. Let's get into it. Over the last 2 decades, legal education has started shifting slowly and reluctantly towards something obvious. Lawyers need hands-on training. And now, experiential learning isn't just a nice-to-have, it's becoming a must-have. Now let's cut through the buzzwords and talk about what experiential learning actually looks like in law school. For example, clinics. You represent real clients, real people, under the supervision of a licensed attorney, usually a faculty member. These can involve immigration cases, housing disputes, tax appeals, criminal defense, or even startup advising. It's real legal work with real consequences. You also have externships where you work in courts, government agencies, nonprofits, or law firms. It's a field placement often for credit, and you might even clerk for a judge, help draft regulations for a state agency, or support a legal aid office. You also have simulations, which are high-fidelity, classroom-based courses where you negotiate contracts, draft motions, or conduct mock trials. There aren't any real clients here, but it's testing very real skills. The goal is to get you out of your seat, out of the theory, and into action. Because let's be honest, reading 150-year-old railroad accident cases is fine, but it won't teach you how to handle a nervous client who's been evicted or how to get a city permit approved by this Thursday. Now, law schools are doing this because they're catching up finally to a hard truth. Employers no longer have the time or the budget to train you from scratch. They want new lawyers who can draft a motion without panicking, interview a client without legalese, spot a conflict of interest before it turns into a malpractice claim, and navigate a bureaucracy without breaking the law or losing their minds. This is not just about looking good on a resume. It's about being good at the work. And that's what experiential learning is for. When we work with students who are prepping for 1L success, we always talk about this. The ability to connect theory to practice early is one of the best predictors of long-term success, not just in law school, but in clerkships, summer jobs, and beyond. Now, here's the part where most applicants get lazy. They'll browse law school websites, glance at a clinics tab, and assume everything's fine. But like everything in law, the fine print matters. You want to ask the schools how many clinics are being offered. Some schools will brag about their award-winning clinics, but only offer 2 of them, and one of them's full until next year. A stronger school might offer more than 10 different clinics in everything from international human rights to tax defense to entrepreneurship. You also want to ask, are clinics widely available or are they ultra-competitive? At elite schools, clinics can be as hard to get into as the school itself, and waitlists are actually common. Meanwhile, lesser-known schools might offer easier access, which means you're getting more actual experience. You also want to ask if 1Ls can participate, because some schools limit them to only 2Ls and 3Ls. Others might allow earlier access even during your first summer, and that could be a real game changer for building skills and connections early. You also want to ask if there's an externship program with national reach. Some schools might have strong externship pipelines, but only in their local area, and that's fine if you want to stay local. But if you might move to New York City, LA, or DC, you want a school with a broader network. You also want to ask if there are specialty labs or innovation hubs. because some schools are going beyond the traditional clinic model that are building tech and policy labs, for example, entrepreneurship incubators, and even AI and the law simulation centers. These schools really get it. They're preparing students for a legal market that does not stand still. Now, let me be blunt for a second. Some schools will slap the word clinic on a glorified seminar where you talk about helping clients, but you never actually do anything beyond role-playing. Others get you into court, on your feet, cross-examining witnesses before your second year is even over. And that difference is huge. One builds confidence, credibility, and real-world instincts. The other just gives you bullet points. And you know which one's going to help you get a job. So in short, the future of legal education is hands-on or it's irrelevant. And as an applicant, your job is to spot the difference between real opportunities and glossy marketing. Now let's talk about AI. AI isn't coming, it's already here. It's passing the bar, it's writing legal briefs, and it's summarizing cases faster than any 1L ever could. It's already making law schools, law firms, and future lawyers deeply uncomfortable. So let's talk about what's really going on and why your choice of law school could make the difference between future-proofing your career or graduating into obsolescence. Now, right now, law firms are hearing both of the following from clients simultaneously. On the one hand, they say, if you're not already using AI to cut billable hours, we're finding someone else. At the same time, they're saying, if you are using AI, I want a discount because I hired a lawyer, not a robot. Welcome to the new normal. Clients want efficiency and the human touch. They want judgment, creativity, and leadership, but they also expect you to move faster, do more, and never miss a detail. No pressure, right? So the question becomes, what role are you going to play? Are you going to compete with AI on speed and data recall? Or are you going to do the things AI can't and learn how to use these tools to do your job better? Here's what AI can do. It can draft simple contracts. It can generate legal research summaries. It can spot common issues across 1,000 different documents. And it can predict case outcomes based on historical data. However, there are a lot of things that it can't do. It cannot exercise professional judgment. It cannot apply ethics to gray area situations. It cannot navigate a client's emotional crisis. And it cannot convince a judge, jury, or regulator that justice demands nuance. That is your job, but only if you train for it. And that brings us to the law schools themselves. Right now, we've got some law schools that are what I call the ostriches. They're pretending nothing has changed. No courses on AI, no policy discussion, no updated curriculum. They're still assigning the same legal writing exercises from back in 2006. These schools will leave you unprepared and unemployable. Then you have the reactors. These schools just realized they should do something. So they've slapped together an AI and the law seminar, hired an adjunct, and called it innovation. It's a start, but it's not nearly enough, and they don't really know what they're doing. But in the third category, you have the innovators. These schools saw the writing on the wall the second ChatGPT came out, and they've got faculty doing cutting-edge research in legal tech. They've built AI clinics, regulatory design labs, and tech policy centers. And they're teaching students not just to compete with AI, but to supervise it. You want to be at a school that is one of the innovators. And if that's not possible, you want a school that's at least climbing into that category. Now, most applicants will ask law schools about bar passage rates, which is great, but you want to ask if they have courses on AI, legal tech, and digital privacy. You want to ask, are students being trained to supervise AI tools ethically? Are there faculty doing scholarship in this area? Is legal writing being updated for the AI era? And are there AI-related clinics, labs, or externships available? Now, this matters for your career because employers don't want a junior associate who refuses to touch technology. They don't want a summer intern who asks, "What's Claude?" And they don't want a clerk who spends 4 hours researching something AI could have found in 30 seconds. But they do want a young attorney who can spot when AI's logic is flawed. They want someone who understands the limits of automation, and they want a team member who can integrate the tools ethically, not blindly. And so, when we work with students who are aiming for big law or public interest careers, this is a big part of our coaching programs. It's not enough to know the rules. You've got to know how the rules are being rewritten in real time. And trust me, they are. And so if your law school is not preparing you for the tech reality of law practice, you're going to spend the first 6 to 12 months of your job just playing catch up, while your classmates who are already trained with the modern tools are taking the lead. You don't want to be the associate who's still printing out emails to read them more carefully. You want to be the one who understands where the tech ends and where human strategy begins, because that's where the value is. Now let's switch gears for a second and talk about the US News Law School rankings and why they're misleading, and finally, what you should focus on instead. Now, most applicants obsess over the rankings, but they have no idea what the rankings actually measure. They'll see a single number next to a school's name, like number 17, and they'll treat it like divine truth. They'll rearrange their entire law school application strategy around it. But here's what nobody tells you. Rankings are not reality. They're not based on what you care about, and they're definitely not based on what makes a good lawyer. So let me show you what actually matters and how to stop playing someone else's game. Now, US News has been the default ranking system for decades, but most people don't realize how strange and arbitrary its formula is. For years, it prioritized things like library size, faculty resources, admissions selectivity, and peer assessment scores. And up until very recently, it actively penalized schools for giving need-based aid. Then, after public backlash, they made a lot of changes, but not necessarily smarter ones. For example, bar passage suddenly jumped from 3% to 25% of the formula when combined with related metrics. Employment stats were rearranged with no transparency, and spending per student still skews the results toward wealthier schools. And let's be honest, these changes weren't made by law professors or hiring managers. They were made by magazine editors of all people. Now here's the twist. Legal employers don't memorize the rankings. Of course they care about reputation, but that's not the same thing. Reputation moves slowly. It's built on decades of alumni success, regional influence, clerkship placements, and consistent performance. It's not tied to whether a school moved from number 14 to number 16 last year. And so if you're fixated on ranking number shifts like a fantasy football draft, you're playing the wrong game. Instead, when we work with students who are choosing between multiple law school acceptances, especially when scholarships are on the table, we walk them through a very different set of filters. So here's what we recommend that you focus on. First and foremost, job outcomes. Don't just ask how many graduates get jobs. Ask what kind of jobs. Where are those jobs located? Are they clerkships, public interest, big law, and are grads staying local, or are they launching national careers? A school with 95% employment is not really impressive if 60% of those jobs are temporary gigs or unlicensed positions. Secondly, you want to ask about experiential opportunities like clinics, externships, and skills-based classics. You want to ask about faculty engagement, like, for example, whether full-time faculty teach 1L core classes, if they hold office hours, and if students actually talk about their professors in a good way. This can shape your entire law school experience and your mental health. You also want to know if the school actually stands for something. Some schools are deeply committed to public service, diversity, or policy leadership. Others focus on getting students ready for corporate law, compliance, or tech regulation. And there's not necessarily a single right answer here, but there is a right answer for you in particular based on your goals. You also want to ask about the alumni network of this school and where they are now, because a good alumni network can help you find summer internships, open doors in your target city or practice area, and connect you with mentors or even future clients. Now here's a pro tip for you. Try searching LinkedIn. Search the school's name plus JD, and then filter by city or law firm. You also want to ask about financial support going beyond just tuition. You want to look at merit scholarships, public interest fellowships, loan repayment assistance programs, and funding for summer internships. Because the best school on paper, in theory, isn't worth it if you're drowning in $250,000 of debt with no safety net. Now, of course, prestige still matters. All else being equal, a T14 law school degree will open way more doors than a T60 or a T100, and big law and federal clerkships are still disproportionately pulled from the top. But here's what's also true. A strong GPA, real experience, and sharp interviewing can beat prestige, especially in regional markets. And as law school becomes increasingly expensive and competitive, the ROI calculation matters more than ever before. So I want you to forget about what US News tells you to value and instead build your own ranking system based on your values, your goals, and your situation. For example, factor in job outcomes, experiential learning, faculty accessibility, regional placements, alumni network, mission fit, and financial aid. Then compare those metrics across the different schools you're considering, because now you're making a decision with your eyes open, not just following a number someone else invented. Now, I know rankings feel comforting because they're simple, but choosing a law school is not a simple decision. You're about to spend 3 years of your life and possibly 6 figures on an education that will shape your career, your lifestyle, and your network for decades. So don't let some lazy algorithm make that decision for you. Make it yourself, strategically, like the future lawyer you are. Now, law school applications are surging this cycle, which means it's going to be harder to get into law school. Now, that doesn't mean you have to panic, but it does mean you need to stop assuming that your solid GPA and a pretty good LSAT score are going to carry you. Because right now, we are in the middle of a multi-year application surge, and it's reshaping what's considered competitive. Now, the numbers are telling us that LSAT test taker volume is way up. The August LSAT, for example, saw double the number of registrations year over year, and applications to top schools have jumped by 10 to 20% year over year. So the easy target schools of 5 years ago have quietly become the reach schools for a lot of applicants. And this is just the beginning. With global uncertainty, social unrest, AI upheaval, and economic weirdness all colliding at once, law school is starting to look like what it was back in 2008, a safe harbor, a stable, respectable, and lucrative career path in a chaotic world. And that means more people are applying. Now, why are people applying in particular? 2 big reasons, and they're both rational. The first reason is that crisis leads people to seek out purpose. Every time our legal system makes national headlines, whether it's a threat to voting rights, rollback of civil liberties, or high-profile Supreme Court drama, people pay attention, especially idealistic college graduates. Many of them are thinking, if the law is how change gets made, maybe I need to be part of that too. We saw this back after 9/11. We saw it again post-2008, the financial crisis. We saw it again after 2016 when Trump got elected for his first term. And we're seeing it again right now. The second big reason is the job market and what people are calling the Great Stay. Because boomers aren't retiring, mid-level jobs are clogged, entry-level jobs are shrinking, and the economy might look fine on paper, but your resume doesn't care. So for a lot of high-achieving college grads, law school seems like a strategic delay. It's a way to level up in your career, avoid stagnation, and maybe come out 3 years later with a sharper resume and a clearer path. In short, this is the return of the JD as plan A, B, and C. So here's what this all means for you. We're dealing with higher LSAT medians because schools have more applicants to choose from. So if a school's 75th percentile LSAT used to be a 167, it might creep up to a 170 this cycle. Same goes for GPAs. Now, that doesn't mean your application is doomed, but it does mean the margin for error is smaller. Now, we've worked with a lot of students who thought a 164 was a lock for their dream school, and it used to be. But now, not so much. Depends on the cycle, depends on their narrative, depends on timing. The better path forward is to shoot for the highest LSAT possible, ideally 170 plus. The other thing to consider is that with more application volume comes more delay. Schools might review applications slower. Interview invites might come later, and wait lists might grow longer and move less. The best way to cut through all of that is to submit your application early. Not in January, I mean October, November at the latest. Rolling admissions favors early applicants, and if your materials are sharp, you can be one of the first admits in the door, while others are still tinkering with their diversity statements. And your application has to be cohesive, because in a crowded field, every part of your application matters more. Your LSAT score can't be an afterthought. Your personal statement has to actually say something. Your resume needs to show leadership, not just jobs. And your addenda, if you need one, had better be precise and strategic, not just Here's what happened. The application isn't a form, it's a story. And if you don't shape it, someone else will, and their story might be sharper than yours. Now, the smart response to all this is to put together a strategy, not just panic. Here is what not to do. Don't blindly add 10 more schools to your list just because applications are up. Don't rewrite your entire personal statement just because of one rando on Reddit. Don't schedule a panic LSAT retake without a real prep plan. Instead, create a tiered school list with reach schools, target schools, and safety schools based on this year's data. Submit your application as early as possible, even if it means finishing up over Thanksgiving break. Treat the LSAT as your biggest leverage point because it's the one part you can still improve, and build a cohesive narrative across all of your application materials. And you might hear people say things like, it doesn't matter where you go, all JDs are the same. This is provably false. It is easy to demonstrate based on the data. Outcomes vary widely based on the school, the region, and the price that you pay. Now, you'll also hear people say only T14 schools matter, and that is also false. Plenty of students from regional schools crush it in the job market, especially when they graduate with low debt, when they build meaningful experience during school, when they leverage strong alumni networks, and when they know exactly what they want and they go after it. Of course, the name matters, but it's not the only thing that matters. And yes, the application cycle is more competitive, and yes, you will have to work harder than applicants did 5 years ago. But the good news is, the playbook to win is still available to you. Apply early, maximize your LSAT, tell a clear story, choose schools strategically, not reactively, and don't compare yourself to TikTok admissions videos. The students who get in aren't always the smartest, but they're the ones who look at the process seriously and built a real plan. So you want to be that applicant. Now let's fast forward for a minute. You've gotten in, you've moved to a new city, you've bought your overpriced casebooks and your highlighter collection that would impress a kindergarten teacher. And now you're sitting in your first 1L class, ready to conquer law school. The only problem is that law school doesn't look like what you imagined, and it's not what your older cousin described, and it's definitely not what Reddit told you. And that's because law school itself is evolving rapidly. The next few years are going to reshape how students are trained, tested, and judged. Now, I already covered this a bit earlier, but I wanted to share one important update from the ABA. The American Bar Association, the ABA, is on the verge of increasing its experiential learning requirement from 6 credits to 12 credits or more. And that might not sound like a big deal, but think about what it means in real time. It means more students in clinics, more externships needed, and more pressure on schools to build real opportunities, not just checking boxes by throwing you into a simulation. Now, if you plan ahead, this works in your favor. You're going to graduate with more hands-on experience than previous classes, which could be a serious edge when it comes to hiring. But if you treat law school like an academic bubble and wait till 3L to figure things out, you're going to miss the window. Now, 5 years ago, courses like AI and the law or blockchain regulation were taught by one adjunct in a dusty conference room. Now, they are core electives, and soon they're going to be mandatory at many schools. So you can expect more courses in cybersecurity law, digital compliance, AI governance, tech and ethics, and legal operations and automation tools. Now, forward-thinking law schools are already integrating this into 1L legal writing classes and professional responsibility modules. Some are even using AI tools in the classroom to teach drafting and editing, just like real firms do. Now, this shift is not about turning you into a programmer. It's about helping you become the kind of lawyer who already knows how to supervise the machines, not get replaced by them. So when we coach students aiming for top firms and public sector careers alike, we emphasize this. Tech literacy is no longer optional. It's part of your legal toolkit, like writing clearly or not using Comic Sans on your resume. Now let's talk about how law school exams are changing as well. The biggest news is that closed book, in-class, human proctored exams are coming back. In order to counter students using ChatGPT for their take-home exams, law schools are going old school, and you can expect more in-person proctored exams, closed book formats, oral assessments and presentations, and time-limited simulations with ethical constraints. This is a big shift. especially for students who haven't taken a high-pressure in-person exam since high school. And so, if your academic muscle memory is built around pause, do a Google search, and revise, you're in for a rude awakening. Now is the time to train for performance under pressure. And that's why LSAT prep, especially endurance-based prep with full-time sections, is great conditioning for law school. So right now, while you're studying for the LSAT, you're not just learning logic, you are actually building the mental reps that'll pay off in 1L finals, oral arguments, and even bar exam essays. And speaking of the bar exam is undergoing a major overhaul. Starting in 2026, many jurisdictions will begin administering the next-gen bar exam, which focuses more on practical skills and less on memorizing obscure rules. You can expect more emphasis on legal reasoning and analysis, less reliance on rote memorization, integration of real-world scenarios and ethical dilemmas, and streamlined subject matter. The good news is, this aligns more with what lawyers actually do. Bad news is, you've still got to perform under pressure, and now in a format that requires flexible thinking instead of flashcard recall. So, if you've been telling yourself, I'm good at memorizing stuff, I'll be fine, it's time to upgrade your approach. Now here's the big picture shift. Law school is starting to behave more like the profession itself. Less hide in the back row and hope no one calls on you, and more collaborate with teammates, handle deadlines, and speak on your feet. Less study quietly and dump knowledge on an exam, and more take responsibility, exercise judgment, and explain your reasoning in front of others. In other words, you're not just learning doctrine anymore. Instead, you're learning how to function in high-stakes, human-centered, unpredictable environments. Now, let's be practical for a second. None of this means you've got to become an AI expert, legal technologist, or ethics philosopher before you even apply. But here's what you should do to prep for this new era of law school. First, build your reading stamina. You're going to be reading more and faster than you ever have before. So get used to reading case law and dense reasoning. An LSAT reading comp, by the way, is great for this. Second, you want to practice more timed work. Do things like the LSAT with the timer on. I know it's uncomfortable, but it trains you to perform when it counts. You also want to start following legal news and tech trends. You don't need to read the Harvard Law Review, but you should know what's happening in the Supreme Court, AI regulation, and big legal shifts. You also want to get comfortable with basic tech tools like Google Docs, PDF editors, ChatGPT, and Excel. And finally, learn how to learn. Law school is not about memorizing rules. It's about processing ambiguity, organizing information, and explaining things clearly, often under stress. Now, let's not sugarcoat anything here. Law school will demand more from you than any academic experience you've ever had before. Not just intellectually, but emotionally, socially, and even physically. You're going to sit in classrooms where everyone else seems smarter than you. You're going to feel behind even when you're ahead, and you're going to doubt your path at times. And that's before you ever step into a courtroom, write a motion, or deal with a client whose life depends on your judgment. So the real question isn't which school has the best ranking. It's what kind of lawyer do I want to become, and which school will help me become that person. Choose the school that aligns with your goals, not your ego. Choose the one that gives you tools, not just a name. And choose the one that'll build you up, not break you down. And while you're at it, start prepping like the future lawyer you say you want to be. Read like it matters. Write like someone's watching. And think like someone's life depends on it, because one day it might. We see this all the time with our students. The ones who win aren't the ones who memorize the most. They're the ones who took this seriously before anyone else did. That's the game now, so play it well.